We understand that Manchester United are edging closer to the signing of Mbeumo. The talks between the two clubs over a deal that's worth about 60 million. They're progressing now, and actually Manchester United ideally want to confirm Mbeumo before they return for pre-season on July the 7th. He's already agreed personal terms with them, and actually, they've already paid 62.5 million for Matheus Cunha. If they bring Mbeumo in as well, the attention will then turn towards recruiting a number 9 for Ruben Amorim. So all the attention at the moment is at that top end of the pitch for Manchester United. It would be a club record sale for Brentford to, we brought the news yesterday that they're set to appoint Keith Andrews as the replacement for Thomas Frank. At the moment, that deal is edging closer for Mbeumo.
Now, staying with Brentford, there's some talk about Christian Norgaard today. I mean, I don't know how long he's got left on his contract, but there's some talk of Arsenal offering 11 million euros. That seems pretty well short of what he's worth, but it could have a lot to do with his contract. So what's the story there, Ollie?
Yeah, so they've offered about just over £9.3 million for Norgaard. It might be to do with his age as well, Paul, because he's 31, but he is an established Premier League player. He's the Brentford captain. It's thought that he could potentially be a replacement for Thomas Partey if Partey does leave the club. And, it feels like Arsenal adding a bit of depth to their squad when you consider the options they have there. I mean, Zubimendi's already coming in, who can play in that number 6 role. They've got Declan Rice, of course, and Mikel Merino. So it feels like Mikel Arteta, who does like a Premier League proven signing, especially if he's adding depth to his squad. It feels like that kind of deal. Spurs are also interested in signing Norgaard. Obviously, he'd be linking back up with his former manager, Thomas Frank. And we understand that Norgaard would be open to a move away, but it's unclear at the moment whether Brentford would want a bit more money for him or if they'd even be willing to sell.
It's some of the things that infuriates me about Tottenham. Maybe that's changing now. Is that they've not brought in those sort of seasoned old players. Sometimes, I say 31's not old, but compared with the way they tend to recruit, which is experience. 18, 19, 20 experience.
Yeah.
I mean, when they've done it, Edgar Davids, Noureddin Neighbour, players who made an instant impact and improved other players around them. Okay, yeah, it's kind of dead money when you're signing someone age 31 and giving him a 3-year contract, but sometimes you need those players to bring the kids on, and maybe the new regime and maybe Thomas Frank can sort of see beyond that, because that's been the way they've tended to work in the past.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Paul, that I feel like, especially in that Spurs midfield, it's the kind of player that they do need. There was plenty of times last season. Listen, there were so many injuries, weren't there, of course, for Spurs last season. But I felt that midfield was overrun. And I like Andy, I'm at Brentford quite a lot covering games for talkSPORT. And, I like Norgaard on the ball, and he's pretty tough tackling in midfield. I do agree with you that it would be a good addition for Spurs. But it's worth saying that at the moment, Arsenal feel like they are front runners in that race for him.
I just wonder how many players Brentford are prepared. They've lost the manager. They've lost the one of their leading scorers. There's a limit to what they need to do and who they'll sell, I would imagine.
Yeah, you've got to feel a bit for the incoming manager, Keith Andrews, haven't you?
Yeah.
Who's going into his first managerial job, could be about to lose a player that got them 20 goals last season, and the captain in Christian Norgaard, and that's two parts of the spine of that Brentford team, if you like, too. So, listen, they're a club that operate like this. That they're a club that do sell players and move them on for a bit of a profit. But with Norgaard, it would be a bit stranger, wouldn't it, given the fee that the Arsenal are trying to pay? It's not like Brentford are making mad money on him. So like I say,
they need to be
at
careful
this stage whether they would sell him. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Now it's been confirmed by Southampton that Carl Walker-Peters will be a free agent. He won't be short of options. But just touch on Spurs briefly, because he would be a homegrown player for them, and that's where they have issues at the moment with the Champions League squad, etc. But I'm sure he'll have more options than going back to Tottenham.
Yeah, certainly there will be some clubs interested. He is open, though, to a move back to Tottenham. That's what we understand, of course, where he started. And he was part of that Southampton side who had such a miserable season. But I think if you ask any Southampton fan, they would argue that he was actually one of the better players He's 28 now. He can play on either side, and actually, you know, it's similar to that Norgaard thing, isn't it, Paul? Where when you look at some of the injury problems Destiny Udogie had, when you look at the other side of, you know, on right back, I think Kyle Walker-Peters would add a bit of defensive stability as well as some depth to that Spurs squad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wouldn't be sorry to see him come back. Darwin Nunez could be part of the sort of great Premier League exodus to Napoli, we understand.
Amazing.
Yeah, he is. We understand pushing for a move over to Napoli, and why not when he sees how well it's gone for some of the other players who've moved out there. But Liverpool are willing to sell him. They want to try and fund a new attacker. You know, when you look at his record overall for Liverpool, 40 goals in 143 appearances, it's okay. It's not quite the 85 million that they bought him for. They would be looking, though, for more than 59 million for Nunez as they look to get him off their books. So, yeah, I mean, he'd be joining the Italian champions if he does end up going to Napoli, and under Antonio Conte, who does have a knack for getting the best out of his number nines.
Marcus Rashford is interesting. They're him and Barcelona are sort of dancing around each other. They're saying, sort of flattering their eyelashes, aren't they? Well, we'd love him to come to us, say Barca. And he says, I'd love to play with Lamine Yamal. So, I mean, somebody's got to step up, haven't they? What's the next move on this one?
Yeah, the line at the moment is that Barca are exploring a loan move for Marcus Rashford, which doesn't really make it much more concrete. But he's obviously one of Manchester United's highest paid players. He earns in excess of 320,000 a week. So Manchester United realised that finding a club to sign him permanently, the chances of that are still quite slim, just because there aren't many clubs that can afford those wages. So you might see a similar situation to the one with Villa, where Manchester United pay some of those wages and Barca pay some. But I mean, we understand that Hansi Flick likes Rashford because of his versatility. But the interesting thing about this is that he would be in addition to their top target, which is Nico Williams from Athletic Bilbao, who also plays on the left-hand side. So you'd have Rafinha there, you'd have Nico Williams, and then Rashford in addition to that. Wow. So, you know, when you think about the game time that Rashford would probably want in a World Cup year, be competitive, won't it?
He's not going to get a game on the right, is he? Let's be honest.
No, he isn't.
They've got someone there already.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, he's pretty good, isn't he?
He's not bad, yeah.
United are going to have to sell some players, and they're not strong sellers. And they're not very good sellers either, but they're not in a strong position, are they? Because all these players like Garnacho, everybody knows that they don't want them.
Yeah, it's very true, Andy. You know, these are players that have had really, really poor seasons as well. So it's not like there's huge queues for many of these players. I think with Garnacho, when you compare him to the likes of, let's say, Sancho or Anthony or Rashford, Garnacho's maybe paid a little less, so a permanent move for him might be a bit more likely. We know there's interest from Napoli. Chelsea were linked with Garnacho, but their main target is Jamie Gittins, who they've submitted a third bid for 45 million. So if they do get Gittins, who's a left-sided player, it might make a move for Garnacho a bit less likely. But I do take your point, and it's a tricky situation for Manchester United, because they won't want to keep on doing these loan moves, but they might have to, because there aren't many clubs who can afford the wages of those other players.
Yeah. Well, then finally, quickly on a bit of Forest, one that could be out but seems unlikely. Anthony Elanga, Newcastle showing an interest, but they can't come to an agreement on a fee. And the other thing was a couple of ins. Timothy Weah and Samuel Mbangula, they both play for Juve. Mbangula's a Belgian player. We know a bit about Weah, of course, from the USA, and they look like they're on their way into Forest.
Yeah, and just on Elanga as well. Yeah, they rejected a bid from Newcastle of 45 million for Elanga. We understand they don't have an intention of selling him, but they would want north of 60 million if they do decide to do that. He scored 6 goals and picked up 11 assists. I mean, Newcastle do need to strengthen on that right-hand side. There's a couple of interesting parts to this story as well, because we understand that the outgoing sporting director for Newcastle, Paul Mitchell, back in January, when Newcastle were also linked with Elanga, Mitchell wanted to offer Jacob Murphy to Forest in a part exchange, but Eddie Howe said no. And it ended up, being a brilliant season for Murphy. He was heavily involved in winning the cup and making sure they got Champions League football. But yeah, it's a position Newcastle need to strengthen. It's whether they stretch to 60 million for Elanga. We do know that they're not just set on him; they're exploring other options. Johan Bakayoko from PSV, Dortmund's Karim Adeyemi, and Mo Kudus from West Ham as well, who's got a couple of suitors.
Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs, Monday to Friday afternoons 1 till 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.